Hi, everyone, and welcome to this session. You're in Career Navigation. My name is Clare Bertrand. I'm the director at JFFLabs, and I oversee our education and career navigation work. And I founded an online career platform for young people called My Best Bets. I've been working at the intersection of navigation and technology for a little over a decade, and I started out running after-school programming at a community-based organization in Boston. I'll let my fellow panelists introduce himself, and then we'll move on to a little housekeeping, discuss the agenda, and we'll get right into it. Gorick?
Thanks so much, Claire, and thank you all for joining us today. My name is Gorick Ng. I'm a career advisor at Harvard College. I'm the proud son of a working class single mother. I'm also a first-generation low-income college student. And this spring, I released a new book with Harvard Business Review Press called The Unspoken Rules: Secrets to Starting Your Career Off Right. It's a toolkit and how-to guide for early career professionals on how to navigate your first day, week, month, year in a new role, how to navigate expectations, how to manage up, how to take ownership, all of these soft skills, interpersonal skills, navigational skills that school doesn't teach, but that can separate top performers from mediocre performers at work.
Thank you. And we'll be discussing aspects of the Unspoken Rules today. But to learn more about the book and go deeper with Gorick on these topics that he just talked about, please check out his interview with my colleague, Krista Ford. It will be part of the Horizons author series. So if we could get the slide deck up, we are going to have a slide deck today. So I hope you all saw the poll below. I think it's below our screen here. I can't necessarily see it. But we're just interested in sort of how your first day on the job went and how you felt. And it will be connected to sort of the conversation we're having writ large. As part of this agenda as well, we want to make sure that you guys are engaged. So please put into the chat some ideas, questions, and solutions. So I'll prompt you all with some questions when we get there. But for this agenda today, we're going to talk about the Unspoken Rules, Gorick's book, Unpacking the 3 C's. We'll get into that. Then we'll talk about how we build better systems together to help navigators or people navigating education and career. And then we'll talk about new paths forward. So what is happening in the field around programs, practice, tech, and policy that's going to improve career outcomes for all. So I wanted to start us with sort of baselining what is a career. So career is made up of jobs, experiences, and training programs that help one advance in pay and responsibility. It represents a changing process rather than a static state. And it calls for a person to become an active agent who constantly builds bridges between oneself and one's work life. Now, I really love this last bullet because it actually kind of gets at the crux and the core of Unspoken Rules. Gorick's book. So I wanted to sort of start with the 3 C's and sort of the building of bridges between oneself and one's work life. And I was hoping, Gorick, you could help us sort of understand what you call the 3 C's in your book and talk a little bit about competence, compatibility, and commitment, and why these things are important and sort of what prompted you to categorize them in this way.
Sounds great. Yes. So over the course of over 500 interviews with professionals across geographies, industries, and job types, I began to understand that there's actually a universal definition for what makes for a high performer at work. And it's someone who demonstrates the 3 C's of competence, commitment, and compatibility. And the idea is this: when you show up as a professional, whether it's in an interview, a cover letter, a resume, and especially on your first day in a new role, the people around you are sizing you up and they're asking themselves 3 questions. Question 1 is, can you do this job well? Which is competence. Question 2 is, are you excited to be here? Which is commitment. And question 3 is, do we get along? Which is compatibility. So competence, commitment, compatibility, the 3 C's. Your job, all of our jobs, it's to convince the people around us to answer yes to all 3 questions all the time. We can start thinking about this as a Venn diagram where our jobs is to find our way to the center of those 3 circles in this Venn diagram. Why? Well, if you aren't showing competence, people aren't going to trust you with more important responsibilities. If you're not flexing your commitment, people may be hesitant to invest in your success at this organization. And if you're not demonstrating compatibility, then people may not necessarily want to be around you in that so-called airport test, you may not pass that airport test with your coworkers. It's not always fair. It's not always a level playing field, and not all of us will start off at the same spot in this Venn diagram, where some people, given their identity, given the context that they're in, they may find themselves already at the center of all three circles, whereas other people, outsiders to the environments that they find themselves in, may find themselves actually fairly far off from that center. However, from an individual's perspective, there's really an onus on the individual to try and navigate one's way into the center. And it also raises questions on a systemic level around, are we creating a sufficiently level playing field for people to find themselves at the center?
Thanks for that. And what I love about Unspoken Rules is that it's super practical, sort of what you just broke down. There are strategies and tactics that one can deploy right after reading the book, right? It's sort of like you read it, go. But on the other hand, and something to the point of just what you mentioned, I don't think the book really shies away from the fact that the responsibility of making it in the workplace or the classroom is really the sole responsibility of the individual. It's true that individuals must have skills and resources to navigate an increasingly complex learning and work journey. But how do institutions, policies, systems help individuals? And how do they maybe make the journey harder? As we know, there are real systemic barriers in place for many learners and workers, especially those who may not have the access to the networks you talk about, Gorick, or the rule book, as it were. These rules, right, from the unspoken rules, being unspoken, represent ways that privilege is exercised by the people who have it, which allows systems of oppression to remain in place and hinder equitable access to education and career opportunity for all. So we want to talk a little bit about sort of like looking at the 3 C's through a systems lens and how the experience of an individual is impacted by systems, or maybe how systems aren't necessarily working for them. So we're kind of looking at the 3 C's here and looking at sort of our individual pressures, right? Like the questions that we have to navigate when we enter the workforce or enter a new job, put some pressure on the individual to navigate. But what are the barriers that sometimes people have to navigate around? So if you look for first at competence, can you do the job well, right? So I think you make this great point in the book that learning, like the classroom and the world of work, are really worlds away from each other. And there's not really a clear sort of way of understanding, okay, what I'm learning in the classroom, how does this apply to my everyday in the workspace? And we also know that lower resource schools may have a higher student to counselor ratio. They may not have as many connections or internship opportunities for young people to build professional skills. So you may have that barrier, and that gap may be even further between what school looks like and what work looks like. And then if we look at compatibility, sort of, do you get along with us, right? So I think compatibility really opens up the idea of, the fact that sometimes we've got implicit bias happening in the workplace. We've got structural inequities built into institutions and systems, such as racism, ableism, sexism. So those things can be barriers to sort of feelings of compatibility within the workplace, as well as commitment. Are you excited to be here? So I think sometimes there's a lack of social supports for learners and workers, or we know there is, which can actually help, it can like question the commitment of others, or some people versus others, I should say. And I think we can even just look at the example of women, right? The United States, I think, is the only developed country that doesn't have a national policy on maternity leave. Women can sometimes be the caregivers. And also, if you're in retail or in the service industry, you can have an unpredictable schedule. So you can't really manage daycare. So there are ways that things can look like you're not committed, or there are barriers in place to make you look sort of uncommitted to a workplace when really you're just struggling because you don't have the supports in place to be successful. So individuals have the agency to take Gorick's guidance and run with it, but we do need to build better systems for more equitable opportunities. So what I want to do now is think through sort of how do we ideate solutions together? Like, what can systems do better? And look at individual cases and think about, okay, what supports exist or should exist to make sure this individual can meet their goals. So this is sort of just the overview here, and I know we're going to use the chat now, but I want to first sort of like talk through what we're going to do. So I want to get people's input and insights into sort of what they think systems can do better by individuals who are navigating education in the workforce. So first, we're going to present a persona. And then we're going to use the chat to share ideas on how policies, practices, and technologies could help an individual reach their goal. So before we sort of go into the persona, I want to invite Gorick to actually share a story that he has in his book about his mother and how he tried to help his mother find a job. And we're going to sort of start there. And while we're doing that, I'd love for you all to think through what supports could maybe be put in place, or something that could have like really helped Gorick and his mom along, and put your ideas in the chat. So Gorick, go ahead.
Sounds good. I'm going to flash back to when I was 14 years old. My mom was laid off from her sewing machine factory job, a job that she's held for over 30 some odd years. She had left school when she was about 12 years old to support her brothers through school, and had worked in a sewing machine factory for much of her life. When her sewing machine factory had gone through a downsizing, she was out of work and was out of options. She was in the later stages of her career, and so didn't have the best eyesight, also didn't want to be spending the next stretch of her career hunching over a sewing machine table. And so as a result, wanted to look for other options. I, as the person who knew how to get onto the internet, who knew how to speak English, became the person to step up. And so I spent recesses learning to write resumes and cover letters, afternoons at the public library looking for jobs, and evenings coaching my mom, all through whatever I could find on Google. The two of us started off this job search by going to a job center locally. This job center at the time had nothing more than a bunch of bulletin boards, a few URLs to organizations and job boards like monster.com, and had a few logins and desktop computers. So we walked up to the desktop computers, we logged in, and we were told to go look for a job. To the two of us, individuals who had never gone through this process before, we didn't even know where to begin. And so what did it mean to look for a job? We heard about the need to apply for jobs, but is that to mean that we should be applying to jobs like we open a bank account, or in the way that we file our taxes? We quickly came upon this rude awakening that we weren't getting any callbacks, that we were clicking submit all over the place. We were writing the best resume we could with whatever templates we could find online. And we had rejection after rejection after rejection. And in many cases, actually no callbacks at all. It was at that point that we started wondering, well, what's going on here? Why is it that despite being told to apply for a job, that we weren't getting any traction? That was in terms of the job search. Stage two was in the interview process. And I'll bring this to my own experience now, where in a job interview, you're inevitably going to be asked three questions. One, tell me about yourself. Two, why are you interested in this organization? And three, why are you interested in this position? And as I think about my first job search, I took these questions literally. Well, why am I interested in this company? Because I need a job. Why else would I be applying for this position? But looking back, I started realizing that there is in fact a right answer to a question like this, that it's not about why you need the job, it's why you want the job. And those unspoken rules continue into the workplace, where once you show up in the workplace, there are these 3 C's that loom above our heads of how do I show competence? How do I show that I'm eager to be here? And how do I show that I'm compatible with the team? Where assignments aren't necessarily divvied out in a structured way. You have to go hunt for the next assignment. You need to volunteer for more assignments. Meetings, phone calls, emails, all of those have their own unspoken rules as well around, well, how do you communicate with a superior? How do you, under what circumstances should you be seen and heard, seen but not heard, or neither seen nor heard in a meeting? And when you don't know what to do next, how do you ask questions without coming across as incompetent or lazy? These are all unspoken rules that I ended up having to navigate through trial and error, and that has become a bit of an oral tradition on the part of our society, where so much of these unspoken rules are passed down from parent to child or from mentor to mentee. And so that's where I hope that we'll be able to brainstorm some solutions today.
Great, thank you. That's an awesome story, and I think one that is actually quite relatable and probably is, very common. Not to take away from you and your mom's situation, but I think that's why your book resonates so much, is because this is what a lot of people struggle with. So I do see in the chat that Judy Garcia said that in their career center, they support a lot of students from transitioning from college to career. So helping them understand sort of the 3 C's and how to navigate that. And I'm also seeing as well that, sorry guys, I'm doing a couple different things here. I've got a chat, but here we go. So I'm going to look at some other chats here. You guys, we're trying to make this interactive. Come hell or high water. I want to hear from the audience. Okay. My computer's working a little bit slow. Bear with me. I think while I wait for this to load, I'm actually going to talk a little bit about something that came to mind for me. So I know that there are a lot of American job centers, like you mentioned that you went to the job center, you just sat down at a desktop and kind of click through submit. I know that many workforce boards, American job centers are doing a lot to modernize, and there's a lot of national initiatives coming up that are going to help with that and really rationalize data. And we'll get into that a bit as we move forward. So I want to move on to the next sort of persona. So thank you for sharing that story. It really sort of warmed up the audience. And I'm going to hopefully have some of my moderators put some of the chat into the moderation box, and we can see what people have been typing up. So again, thanks for your insights here. And I'm in the presenter chat. I was in the moderation chat, guys, moderating comments. So sorry about this. I'm going to keep moving because we only have 30 minutes together. So in terms of this next sort of persona, we're going to look at Reggie. So this actually comes from the gig economy report that my colleagues at JFF put out in September. So this is really great, and it actually gives a lot of insights into the gig economy and young people in it. So what we want to do is, again, while I talk through this, think about different policies, practices, and programs, tech, or even other intrepid ideas, what I'm calling intrepid ideas, wherein we want people to think sort of outside of the box. So again, share in the chat would be great. So Reggie's 23. He's been working in the gig economy for 5 years, and it is his sole source of income. Reggie has always hoped that working in the gig economy would be a short term and a stepping stone to something better. He wants to pursue a career as a creative, but doesn't know how to find steady, reliable work in those fields. And although he's maximized earnings from his app he's not gaining the skills or experience he needs to move in the position that is aligned with his career goals. So what is very obvious to me here is that Reggie is competent, he's committed, and he's obviously compatible with what he's doing. But what are some policies, practices, or programs or tech that could help Reggie out to meet his individual career goals? Oh, I like this. So career navigators for one-on-one support to be a point of contact for when childcare falls through. So I think this is a comment that was based on the commitment piece. Provide culturally relevant orientation that equates systems in a comprehensible way. Also, we say that we want to help individuals achieve their career goals, but shouldn't we also help them think realistically about their skills and market for them? My daughter wanted to be a professional dancer, but it's never really a realistic goal. So understanding sort of like what is the labor market, right? Like what if you do train up to be a dancer, what jobs are available for you? And just the recognition of a job searching as a skill is helpful. Absolutely. So I think this actually points to sort of something that Reggie could do in terms of, the skills that he could essentially, let's say, surface for himself through all of what he's done during the gig, with his work in the gig economy. So something that comes to mind is like a tool like Ideate ID that uses machine learning. So people put in what they're doing right now, and then they also can get recommendations for occupations that align with the skills that they have in their last job. So again, just using some technology, using the connection with people. So Frank Erdman from Tahoe, taking a comprehensive case management style, so holistic and proactive. They're reconnecting working adults with the education system and then helping them navigate those systems and personalizing the experience. That's amazing. So I think that's a huge sort of like, what can the system do? What can programs do? What can practice do to help people like Reggie, people like Gorick's mom, sort of understand systems and navigate even better. So thanks for your insight and input, everybody. And feel free to reply to each other in the chat as well. That's fantastic. So we're going to move on to sort of new paths forward. So what are we doing? And we've already seen some examples in the chat of what's better policy, practice, and tech for improved career outcomes for all. So sort of taking the 3 C's, taking our systems lens on the 3 C's, thinking about individuals that we serve or that go through these systems and what's happening in the field right now. And as I walk through these examples, please feel free to share in the chat as well. So I just wanted to sort of note this quote from our CEO, Maria Flynn. Just again, this is a challenging issue. So this is, I'm not even gonna read this through, but we're running out of time. So we'll be sharing this deck following up. But again, this is a challenge to help individuals navigate. There's myriad reasons why, and we're getting into that now. So in terms of policy, right? So how can policy, what are the recommendations that we have for federal government as well as state in terms of how we help people move through these systems? So again, providing guidance, technical assistance, and funding to high schools and colleges on how to help every student develop a career plan prior to graduation. Also using state resources to expand the use of tech-enabled career navigation tools in education and workforce programs, and also increase the capacity of career counselors. So this can better personalize that experience that we just had someone in the chat talking about, especially for those first-generation students or students who are coming from low-income communities, and they can get, again, that personalized one-on-one help to understand what they want to do next. Additionally, we do have examples of states that are doing really great work in this area of education and career navigation and career development as well. Michigan has a virtual platform wherein people can actually record themselves doing an interview, and they get some improvement and some feedback from real career coaches. I know there's a number of states that are aligning or integrating career readiness standards into their academic standards. So a lot of this work is working out already. So with practice or programs, we have a whole slew of innovations that are happening to help people sort of navigate education and career. So we have something like Possible Futures, where essentially high schools, districts across the country are integrating career readiness curriculum. So something like Possible Futures, which is as for middle schoolers to early high schoolers, to get them sort of to think about their identity as a professional, something like the Opportunity Network, as well as something like Junior Achievement, which has been around for a long time, but really focuses on sort of building entrepreneurial skill sets. Ethnographies of Work, which is a course out of CUNY, the City University of New York, where students actually get internships, but also get research skills to really observe those unspoken rules that you talk about, Gorick, and sort of unpack those. The Career Everywhere is also a program at UConn where faculty members are actually integrated into career services and utilize their networks to help build social capital for students. Also the Unspoken Rules, obviously. These books exist, your book exists. And then Impact Employers. So these are employers that are actually surfacing these unspoken rules, making them super explicit, and are dedicating themselves to equity, diversity, and inclusion in these ways. So for technology, we do know that tech is like revolutionizing work and education. It has for the past several decades. It continues to. So we have some scans that JFF has done, JFFLabs, where we look at the market, and we know that there's a lot of technology providers and companies that are making sure that we have a lot of technology in place to help folks. And again, those individuals, but we want to make sure that all of this technology is connected. So some of the categories where these technologies are sort of helping people along is discovering connect to work, develop, nudging and microlearning, performance management, and employee voice. I'm running out of time, guys, so I'm sort of trying to go pretty quick. And you can see what all of our technologies are, what we've recommended, what we've taken a look at in the scans that are on jff.org. And in terms of sort of the intrepid ideas, this is not anything that's all that sexy, but essentially it's sort of like, how do we pull together the information people need to navigate well and make good decisions? So private-public partners, they would design an interoperable platform for use across state education, workforce development, economic development, unemployment insurance, and human services systems to enable lifelong career navigation and access to quality information and social capital. It's a lot, but we can get there. And then also universal ledgers, like how are we using blockchain? And I'm interested to hear too, sort of what are the big ideas the folks in the chat have as well around education and career navigation. So we've just gone through sort of what the field is doing, and I just want to sort of wrap it up on how we can create a career navigation system to make the 3 C's easier, right? So we want it to be learner-centered and individualized. We want it to be designed to be user-friendly, innovative, and interactive. We want it to be facilitated and augmented by professional counselors. So as we see in the chat, people are talking about mentors, talking about personalization, and technology could really help, but we do need humans to help each other, right? And then aligned with employer needs, LMI, designed to develop navigation as a skill, which is, again, something somebody mentioned in the chat, and also being equity-driven, sort of pulling us back to these 3 C's, the unspoken rules, making sure everyone has the rule book, right? And is able to sort of like play the game, Gorick, as you say in your book. So I want to sort of stop there and let you sort of, we went through a lot. There's been a lot of chatter in the chat, which I love. But when we think about competence, compatibility, and commitment, what kind of things are sort of coming up for you in terms of, how the interaction between individual and system and what we can do to help individuals? And sort of, again, just like coming back to the 3 C's, making it easier for everybody. So wanted to know if you had any additional thoughts.
Yeah, I've actually lost count of the number of times we've used the word navigation in this session. And I think it really does I think it really does speak to how important this is, where as I was first embarking upon this book writing journey, I was looking at the dichotomy and the balance between soft skills and hard skills, technical skills versus interpersonal skills, whether it's soft skills, power skills, human skills, interpersonal skills, professional skills. There's so many synonyms for what we are talking about here. But I think one of the concepts that is often overlooked, not in this session, but in general, are these navigational skills. Whereas I think about what we're taught in school, whether it's for up to 12 years or 16 years or beyond, so much of school is about bubbling bubbles or filling in the blanks or really conforming to highly structured environments where the syllabus will tell you what's coming up. Instructions are nicely laid out. The expectations are nicely written down for you explicitly. However, when that transition from school to work occurs, whether as an intern, co-op, apprentice, et cetera, all of a sudden you're dealing with ambiguity. And our system of education today really doesn't set people up very well to navigate this form of ambiguity. So as I think about what we can do for individuals, it's to instill so many more of these navigational skills, while at the same time, for institutions, for folks who are in a position of influence and power, it's really about recognizing that these unspoken rules exist. They do exist, whether you choose to recognize them or not. And once you do recognize them, then the onus is on our systems builders to be able to level the playing field for all. That's my hope.
Absolutely. And we are at time, and I love the way you just wrapped that up. And this was very rapid fire. Thanks, everybody, for helping us get through the technology piece. But I also want to say thank you for participating in the poll. And 68% of us were jittery when we first started our first job. So I think if we have the systems in place, we get individuals understanding the 3 C's and getting your book, understanding the tools they need, we can feel more confident. We'll have 68% of us confident, or maybe 100%. So Gorick, thanks so much for your time today. Thank you, everybody who participated, for your time. I love the activity in the chat. I'm so excited to do a deep dive into it. And again, thanks so much, Gorick. Thanks to everyone who participated in this really rapid fire session.
Thanks so much, Claire. Thank you all for your participation. This was a lot of fun.